This is karma. This is positively proof that karma is real, that Buddhism is the one true religion, that every other faith is a lie. This is evidence that Buddha was right about everything. Karma is real. And what do I mean by that? Well, when Tears of the Kingdom came out in 2023, one of the big gigantic gigacopes about it was that it's gonna get buried by Elden Ring. It's gonna get buried by the DLC. The DLC is gonna be the greatest game ever. And then it just gets delayed, and it comes out the next year and just gets completely buried by everything else that came out in 2024. And now, in 2025, we are seeing the Elden Ring Electric Boogaloo 2. They are putting out a second Elden Ring thing in 2 years, right? That's even more sloppish and derivative than the last one, okay? Nightreign is a disaster in every sense of the word, right? Nobody's talking about it, nobody plays about it, nobody's enjoying it, There's a handful of influencers who have claim that they put dozens of hours into the beta or whatever, but the reality of the situation is these guys are career Dark Souls players. They are never going to admit that these games aren't good, right? The general audience has made it very clear that Nightreign isn't very good. It's not popular. Nobody cares about it. And I've talked about this as an individual release, just how worthless Elden Ring actually was. I've been talking about that a lot. Leading up until release, since the beta came out, actually, or maybe since it was announced, I don't really know. But Elden Ring is a declining brand that will not be around in the foreseeable future. It is going to get burned to a crisp before they even really do anything with it. Everything they've done so far after the initial release has been a complete and abject failure, and Nightreign is just another example of that. Now, that's the issue with FromSoft individually. That's an issue with FromSoft as a development studio. Their games are slop. That's just them. Okay, that's just them in a vacuum. But the reality is this is an entire industry. The reality is people are playing better games all the time on Nintendo hardware, right? I wouldn't be surprised if Fantasy Life 2 actually outsold Nightreign, by the way. But we have Nintendo Switch is this huge success story. It's the console to beat right now. Nothing ever came close. Nintendo Switch is killing it. There were so many games in the past 3 years that were far more successful than Elden Ring ever was or ever will be. I've been talking about this for a long time, but now this is where the karma sets in. After all of that bluster about how Nintendo Switch couldn't handle Elden Ring, how it was underpowered, how it would never come to Nintendo consoles. Elden Ring is coming to Nintendo Switch, and Nightreign, which is the new Elden Ring game, is getting buried by the Nintendo Switch 2. That's right. The new Nintendo console has completely buried Elden Ring to the point where a week from now, nobody's even going to be talking about this. It is going to get completely destroyed by Mario Kart World. After all that bluster about how popular and successful Elden Ring was, it was not. This is the end result of it, is that it's getting buried by a new console launch. Not only is it going to get outsold by Mario Kart, it's also going to get outsold, I think, by a wide range of titles on Nintendo Switch 2. Cyberpunk, I think, is going to be a big deal. Street Fighter 6 is going to be a big deal. There are just so many games in the launch window of Switch 2 that are just going to be these huge giga hits that Elden Ring and FromSoft as a whole will not be able to keep up with. It's so bad that I think Elden Ring, when it does get ported over, is honestly going to get completely buried by all of the far superior games on it. Yakuza 0 has more credibility. Cyberpunk has more credibility. Hitman has more credibility. Street Fighter 6 has more credibility. What exactly is going to encourage people to come back and play Elden Ring on Nintendo Switch 2. Anybody who does is just going to be oh man, there are just so many better Nintendo games on this. I'm going to play a real game like Princess Peach Showtime or WarioWare. right? Like, nobody who's like familiar with Nintendo games would ever pick up Elden Ring and say, "Oh, this is some great thing I've discovered." No, like nobody except the absolute most, the epitome of like the casual gamer thinks Dark Souls is anything like relevant or interesting. If you play more than like 10 games a year, you're not going to find Dark Souls challenging or interesting at all. FromSoft is just not that great of a developer. And I've been saying this for a long time now, but Nightreign does seem to be like this a sign of what's to come. Elden Ring is coming out, and it is failing to like keep attention away from the Nintendo Switch 2, right? This was FromSoft's attempt at trying to keep people away from Nintendo Switch 2, to try to get people on PlayStation and Xbox, trying to like keep the dream alive, and yet like the reality is Switch 2 is already far outperforming anything that FromSoft will ever be able to accomplish. That's just the reality of the situation. And it's going to get worse going forward. Like FromSoft is never, ever, ever going to recapture the Elden Ring hype. People are getting bored of it. People are sick of hearing about it. They can't branch out into other franchises. They are just going to continue this slow, gradual decline into irrelevancy. And it's not just because that the games aren't good and because like Nintendo games are better. The issue is Dark Souls fans really have overplayed their hand. They really have spent the past like decade screaming at everyone about how FromSoft is just like the best developer in gaming and how they're the best ever made. And the reality is just the opposite of that, really. Like FromSoft just isn't anything special. It's not noteworthy at all. It just has this really rabid extremist online fan base that desperately do everything they can to keep up the narrative and continue this farce that FromSoft is somehow going to keep itself relevant by making the same game over and over again. Like that is the big issue when it comes to FromSoft, is that like there is no variety, there is no like they don't produce anything new that takes off. Like all they can do is just do the same thing over and over again and like promise people like very difficult video games that no casual can actually beat. Like FromSoft isn't so much a game, it's more of a status symbol. And I think that's the way to kind of look at it going forward, because nobody actually likes playing Elden Ring, right? Nobody actually enjoys fighting these mediocre, uninspired bosses. Nobody actually likes the gameplay loop. Nobody actually likes the open world. Nobody actually likes any of that. Like, playing Elden Ring is just a status symbol among gamers to prove that you're a real man because you play hardcore games for hardcore gamers. But the reality is, if you're a good gamer, if you're someone who actually likes playing lots of different video games, you will inevitably have a far better time playing exclusively on Nintendo Switch.